Okay, well, thank you very much, Joy. And I am going to start sharing my slides, and then we'll take it from there. So Joy or Tanya, interrupt me if you can't hear me or if I'm babbling. No, don't interrupt me if I'm babbling. So welcome. Thank you very much for taking time this afternoon out of your schedules to attend this series. This is part 3 of the Stormy Fiscal C series. And my name, and I'll explain that a little bit later. And I'm going to talk about do a little recap of the last two sessions. My name is Gary DeZiel. I am a community development specialist with University of Vermont Extension. And you can see my email address there if you would like to contact me. And I just wanted to give a shout out to Vermont Department of Libraries, to Joy, and to Tanya, who are with us running the show today. And I just thanks for giving me this opportunity, and enjoy working with you, of course, and libraries. I have, if I can get my slide to move, there we go. So today's session is going to be focusing on revenue. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a recap of the last 2 sessions, sort of trying to weave it together a little bit for you. Some of you may have been at the sessions, others may have not. And so I'm going to try to put it together a little bit. And then we're going to talk about revenue very briefly and ideas to raise revenue. And then we've got this panel of some really neat people who are going to talk about some cool ideas for raising revenue that they've had success with at their library, and to follow that up with discussion. So the kind of like the point of this session is really to talk about revenue and to talk about creative ideas to raise revenue. So on session 1, so this is Stormy Seas. So the first one is rafting down the the rapids of the economy right now. Talking about inflation, and talked about recession, impact of inflation on resetting pay strategies, the impact of inflation on library pay and benefits, and then Jenny Rosicki, excuse me, sorry Jenny if you're here, director of the McCullough Free Library, talked about some creative things they've done with employee pay, and that was followed by discussion. So in that first session, this is new news to you. Inflation is hitting us hard. The poor are disproportionately impacted. And I put that up on the slide specifically because, the median revenue for Vermont Public Libraries is about $85,000 or so. And so there isn't much room in the budget to handle inflation. And on the top left of the slide, you can see this is just out in the last day or two by the U.S. Department of Labor. And this is from, this is the Consumer Price Index urban from the Boston, Newton area. So, take this with a grain of salt, but inflation year over year, that would probably be August through August, maybe July through July, is 8.3%, and pay is up 6.9% higher than a year earlier. So if you haven't received a 6.9% increase in pay, don't think that it's at all rare, but this is what the average across industries are doing. And what we saw last in the first presentation is that the private sector is really driving these increases in pay, and government sectors are lagging behind. The June through June amount was actually 3.2%. So we talked about inflation, we talked about recessions, like what is a recession? How do we know if it's happening or not? Right now we're in a very weird economic situation. There are some classical measurements of recession, which is the reduction of gross domestic product in 2 consecutive quarters, which happened in the United States in first quarter and second quarter. The data for the third quarter are not in, but a lot of strange things are happening. And the reason why we think about recessions, and it's along with inflation, is that recessions have been shown to decrease property tax receipts, which are the basis for municipal funding, as well as charitable giving. So there's like two hits on things that libraries rely on for revenue. Now we're in a very different situation. Property values have skyrocketed. So I don't think property tax receipts are an issue at all in Vermont, but not at this time. But if there is a recession, if people start losing their jobs, then that could be an issue with charitable giving and maybe defaults in property tax. But there was no, right after the pandemic happened that summer, there was a quick recession, and property tax, at least in my town of Georgia, Vermont, there was no impact on delinquency on property tax payment didn't go up. So I think we're in good shape there. In this time of inflationary pressure, the most important thing is to know your budget, know your status, know where you are in spending. Also, some of the other key topics things that we talked about was promoting relationships, making sure that you had strong relationships and collaborations. We touched upon diversifying revenue, but we didn't get into it. Building cash reserves is an important thing to do before inflation and before recession hit. And when we were talking about pay, we had a few slides of tips on kind of like trying to raise the whole boat for your library, as well as you as an individual seeking pay raises and how to advocate for yourself. And Joy has the copies of session 1 and session 2. In session 2, we talked about batten down the hatches. So this is focused on expenses, trimming sales. So we reviewed some of the basics in budget management and the budget cycle. So clarifying financial responsibilities, who does what, in the trustees, what does the treasurer do? What are you responsible for if you're a trustee or if you're a director? And we talked about a short review on the top 10 best practices of budget management. Again, if you go back to like all sorts of popular press information and things written about budgeting, and during an inflationary time or during a recession, one of the most important things is to know where you are. So top 10 best practices of budget management, just staying on top of that so you know where you're spending, how much you're spending, and where you are relative to your budget. We talked about discretionary and non-discretionary costs, budget tightening ideas, and then we talked a little bit about a sample budget. So this is a little more information about what we talked about in session 2. Knowing your budget status. I thought it was important to recognize and be able to articulate to the trustees to the select board, or other people who help determine your revenue, is the impact of non-discretionary spending on your budget as you argue to maintain pay equity, programming, and collection expenses. So for instance, if you have utility expenses and the cost of heating fuel is going up, that's something you really can't control. I mean, you can control by trying to tighten up the building, making sure the boiler is maintained, doing coverings on the windows. There's a lot of creative things to do to try to reduce utility costs. However, when heating fuel oil goes up 45%, there isn't anything you can do about that, and it's just an expense. So that's something that we just have to pay these non-discretionary expenses and then argue to maintain your pay, programming, and collection expenses, along with other expenses. Professional development is really important. And then we talked about budget tightening ideas, and then if expenses press ever upward, which they are, then revenues must follow. So now we're moving into talking about revenue. And after, I think I only have 2 or 3 slides, and after that, we'll get into the panel that we've put together with the help of Tanya and Joy, reaching out to some librarians across the state. So reviewing the revenues, number one, and for many of you, especially if you're a municipal library, of course, is the municipal appropriation. In the town of Georgia, the municipal appropriation is essentially like 100% of the budget. There's no Friends group yet in the town of Georgia. We do not have an endowment. Grants are important, but municipal appropriation is very important. So maintaining a relationship with them, building a relationship with them, explaining to them throughout the year what's going on, how you provide value to the municipality is very important. And then, it's interesting. Every municipality differs in how they approach budgeting. The town of Georgia this year is moving to a zero-based budgeting model. So every department, regardless of what you received last year, starts with zero, and then you have to build the budget based on a expressed and demonstrated need. So first you start with payroll, and then you explain all your other expenses, what you need, and how those are important to you. So municipal appropriation is all about maintaining that relationship and building relationships, understanding what the town is thinking, what the select board is thinking. How are they looking at inflation? What do they think about the CPI? What's the early information about what they're thinking about pay increases? So that's important. Gifts and endowments are the next two things on the slide, and these are very important to many libraries across the state. A gift is a donation of money, and it's meant to be spent. So it's no reporting to the donor, and somebody gives you money, they say, spend it on the library. They don't expect you to save the money, to invest the money. It's just to be spent. For many of you, you have Friends, which are nonprofit organizations that do the fundraising and sit down with you, and you prepare a budget on an annual basis. But gifts can also be run through municipalities, as can endowments. An endowment is a donation of money or a bunch of donations of monies meant to grow forever. So it's what you do is you maintain and grow the principal, and that's done with an investment strategy. You set down in a endowment policy specifics about how to invest the principal, and it's usually a conservative investment policy. And then there's also how you spend the endowment, and generally it's maybe 3 or 4 or 5%, and this is written down, of the average of the last 12 quarters financial balance, or the last 16 quarters. So that's an endowment, and again, it's meant to grow forever and to supply revenue to you on a reliable and ongoing basis. There was a question, and this was from Susan Smolinski, and she asked this question about a week ago. She writes, we have an endowment and use the average value of the last 12 quarters when calculating the 5% to draw as part of our yearly budget. When we built our budget earlier this year and made the calculation, we decided to use the whole 5%. However, with the way the market has gone, if we take that full budgeted amount, we will be touching the principal. So far, we have only drawn a portion of the budgeted transfer. And she asked advice in the situation. In this situation, I know of, actually, there's a friend who's stopped drawing as much money from his retirement account. And if you can make it get by on a little less money from your endowment, it would be probably a wise thing to do. Of course, talk to your financial advisor about this, but endowments have gone down 15 to 20% this past year. And so you're drawing money out of the endowment that will never be recovered. So if you can protect the endowment, and if your policy allows, your endowment policy allows you to protect it, then that's probably a really wise thing to do. And then moving to grants. Grants are non-repayable funds for something usually very specific, and it always requires financial program reporting, as well as probably programmatic reporting. You know, what you did, what the outcome was, what the impact was. And this is just wanted to stop on grants a little bit. Excuse me. I work for the University of Vermont Extension. And if we go back 10 years ago, or we go back 20 years ago, grants might have been 20 or 15% of our revenue. You go back 10 years ago, they were 47% of our revenue. And now, last year, they were 2/3 of our revenue. So we are very, very dependent on grants. And I myself am about half on federal grants. And so it's a way to increase programming. It's a way to, to improve, to increase what you do. I mean, there's some downsides to grants that I'd be glad to talk to anybody about, and upsides, but grant funding could be an opportunity for enhanced revenue. And here's a bunch of other different ideas. And if you have any ideas, if you wanted to put them in your chat, in the chat, that would be welcome. And after this slide, we're going to get to our panelists. So here's just some ideas, and you can see them. A lot of them have to do with fundraising, raffles, bequests in planned giving. I've read about some libraries partnering with online sales websites like Amazon. Some of the other big website sales websites have an opportunity for you to register with them, and some people to pick you as somebody they donate a portion of the sales amount to. There are sponsorships and the contributions. Again, this is, I'm just throwing these ideas out. This doesn't perhaps work in a municipal environment, but there's always opportunities for this sort of thing. Sponsorships. We, for instance, UVM Extension, we do get sponsorships for meetings, for instance, to support what we're doing. And we also have to be very careful about whose money we accept based on their values as an organization, how they are working and treating diversity, equity, inclusion issues, all those things. So this is I'm just throwing it up on the board, but there's a lot to think about if you think about looking at any of these things. There's a question from Margaret. Are we allowed to hold raffles, etc., as a municipal entity? This is I think that I'm going to have to get back to you, Margaret. If you have a friends group, of course you can do it. And that's right. And I've got a question into Vermont League of Cities and Towns, and they referred me to the Secretary of State office, because fifth on the list here is sales and fees. So I had a question to Jenny Prosser. Some of you may know her. Can a department within a municipality run a retail store? And it's not really retail when you're a nonprofit or if you're a municipality. It's really you're trying to get net revenue. So you make t-shirts for $10 and you sell them for $15. You do coffee cups for, etc., or caps. And I will find out the answer to this. And it's interesting. I talked to my town clerk about, can the library sell things? Can they sell, bling to to patrons, to anyone who wants it, have an online store and have some little thing in the, in the library? And she said, well, I don't know. Tell me if you learned something. But she said the fire department does do that, and the money goes through the town. So I'll get back to you, Margaret, and whoever is interested in this. Can a municipal library have a net positive revenue kind of retail shop for a little extra money? A resale of unused items is listed there. Excuse me. And then there's GoFundMe campaigns. There's matching gift programs. I've also read about galas and art shows, events and performances. And in fact, one of our panelists is going to be talking about a gala they did. And Laura, I see your message, and I will definitely share what I learn. I'll probably share it through Joy so that she can share it without any mistakes to folks in the group here. And Margaret says, thanks, and how we make sure that our revenue stays in the library budget and not go to the general fund. Right. In a town budget, you actually have to budget the revenue. So it has to be voted on at town meeting. So if you expect the revenue from your sales to be $1,500, then it has to be a budget item in the town budget for the library, and it has to be voted on. Otherwise, you're right, it could go right back to the general fund. So those are some of the ideas that I've come up with. I know that I do recognize the wisdom here in this virtual room and how creative you are in thinking about these things. I mean, like, you live it every day. And I know that any library, there's just not a lot of resources to go around. So you've been very creative. Are there any other questions before I move on to introducing our panel members? I'll give a few seconds for the chat to be typed into. And we'll have time for discussion too. From Laura, is there an outer limit of fundraising versus municipal allocation? Man, that's always a fear, isn't it? That, like, the municipality, the select board will say, look at that revenue you're bringing in from the endowment and gifts. We don't think that we're really, well, maybe we can level fund you this year. So it's always a challenge. I don't know if Joy or Tonya or anybody have a suggestion about this. To me, it's all about continuous communication with the select board, the people making the decision about your budget. Well, that's the trustees, right? But the select board are a very important part of the process. Keeping that relationship good and stable and open, and always showing your value by doing good PR, good promotion of what you do. Don't hold, you want your light to shine because you do so much for so many different people within your community. And Jennifer Lucas has a question on the 4% or 5% of endowment to go to operations. What if that is above or below the sum of the interest, dividends, and capital gains from the endowment? Usually in an endowment policy, you have the trustees have a range they can choose. That is, the annual appropriation would be 2 to 4 or 2 to 5% of the following, the 12 quarterly balances in the past. And I think that, the whole point of it is to try to even out the peaks and valleys what an endowment, of what any investment might go through. You know, we're in this significant bear market. So I think at this time, working with your financial advisor closely, seeing if you can trim your budget a little bit, if there are some expenses that you could forego to another year, those are important discussions. So if it is above the sum of the interest and the dividends, the capital gains, if you're eating into the principal, I think it's important to talk to your financial advisor about those things. And then Laura writes, I was thinking about how hard it is to raise money through silent auctions, et cetera, given the relatively small municipal allocation. Right now, we are 3-to-1 municipal to fundraise dollars. I think, yeah, that's it. It makes it tough. Fundraising I'm not built for fundraising. I can't do a very good ask. It doesn't seem like I have the right personality. But if you find the right people, it makes it a little easier. But it's a challenge, and it's interesting, Laura. Every library, I think, in this meeting has a different kind of portfolio, and how it varies. So thanks for those comments. I'm going to move on. It's 1:27, and we have this wonderful panel on revenue generation. They are doing this voluntarily, so thank you so much, Catherine, Rebecca, and Rachel. And I asked them to share some thoughts with you about, like, what propelled them to raise the funds. What did you do to solve the problem? Was there a magic ingredient? What was the outcome? What did you learn? Those sorts of things. And they got like 6 or 7 minutes each, or 5 to 6 minutes each. And Catherine is the director of Bixby Library in Virginia. It's a beautiful library. I have been in Bixby. I don't think the day I was in Poultney, it's far away. I live, up by the Canadian border here. In Poultney, it was closed. And I haven't been to the newer library in Waterbury. So, Catherine, I'm going to let you kick off the program, and I think you can show yourself. And there you go. Hello, Catherine. Thank you.
Hey there. Hey, Gary. Thank you so much. And thanks to everybody. Thanks for this opportunity. Thanks to Joy for reaching out. I'm Catherine Hayes at the Bixby Memorial Free Library. We are a 501c3 library, so we're not a municipal library. So I can't answer any questions about, that might come up on that score, but of course, the rest of the team can. So I thought what I would talk about is the Bixby Gala. And again, I think Gary's questions are really great. So I'm going to go ahead and follow the outline that he proposed, because I think it's the kind of questions that I would have if I was thinking about it. The first was, what propelled you to do this kind of fundraising? And to be honest, the Bixby Gala has been going on for about 20 years. So it's not that it was brand new, but what was brand new was COVID. And there was no gala in 2020. So obviously everything was shut down. We were closed. I was brand new. But there was also this fear that since we didn't raise any money through the gala, what were we going to do in the next year? So what propelled me was A, COVID, and B, pure unadulterated fear that we weren't going to have enough money to keep the library going in my first year. So certainly, that was a consideration. The other thing that really was a challenge was that the people who had been doing it for all those years were kind of the same people who had been doing it. And they were really, I wouldn't say burned out, but they were ready to pass the torch to kind of the next generation and the next group of people. So that was a little tricky. And I had never run a gala before. So that was, I had a few challenges to come out of it. It's held in June. So starting in January of 2021, I decided to really think about this as a fresh start with kind of a lot of everything that happened at the library with a new me and coming out of COVID being closed. And so the theme kind of ran the rest of it. And I really strongly recommend thinking about how you sort of set it up. It wasn't just the Bixby Gala, it was the theme of Here Comes the Sun. And everything that we did was bright yellow, big bright sun. Everybody was cooped up. We were obviously ready to get out. We had been having a band called The Grift, who many of you may know. It was a fabulous dance band. They were on hiatus. They came back and said, yes, we do it. So it's, really the tagline, it's kind of time to come out and dance and put on your dancing shoes. Of course, by June, it was not clear that we were going to be done with COVID, and obviously we weren't, but there was this blessed window that happened right about the time that we wanted to have it, that many people didn't come because they didn't want to take their masks off, but we had just enough people to really get it going. And it was honestly kind of the first major social event in this area, the 5 towns we serve, coming out of COVID. So we had that wind behind our sails, or really kind of took all of those changes and challenges and turned them into opportunities in terms of how we thought about it. So Fresh Start was a really big part of it. We kind of, as Gary was talking about zero-based budgeting, we kind of did zero-based planning because we really didn't have anybody who had been on the gala before part of it, except to give advice. And we had fabulous record keeping from what we did before. But the first thing that I did was to really tap 2 folks in town who were energetic, next generation, fresh start, fresh ideas. And those co-chairs were well connected, knew the community, and they were really the secret, the magic to all of it. The other thing that was, I think, the magic to it is that we really thought of this as win-win-win. So it needed to be a win for the library in terms of fundraising, but it also needed to be a win for the people who were going to be paying the ticket prices, which we decided to increase because we figured people had been saving a lot of money during COVID, and it turns out that it, had a lot of positive impact on people. So we did that. But we also wanted to be a win-win-win for the business community. And it turned out that we were willing to we found in our budget how to be able to pay them for the refreshments, for everything else. But coming out of it, they decided to actually donate all of the food and all of the beverages. And that allowed us to really, kind of turbocharge our income, but also to take a lot of opportunity to thank them, to make signage so that they were really feeling like they were part of the celebration of a local community. So in terms of how we went about it, we really thought about this, not just about the library, but about building the community. And for me, again, as a new person, this was also an opportunity for me I always felt like Gary, I could do sort of corporate fundraising, but personal fundraising, I've always had more of a challenge. So I had to put on my big girl pants, as my sister said, and get out there and do personal asks. And I quickly learned that this was an opportunity for me to meet people and have conversations and say, what are you interested in? What is it about the library that you love? What role does the library play? Tell me about a time when the library made a difference in your life. And again, the silver lining was that people were wanting to help, wanting to support, wanting to find a way to get together and celebrate, especially if there was a nice platform to do it and there was like the energy behind it that happened. The other magic ingredient, I think, was that, when things happen over a number of years, there can be bad feelings and who said what. Anyhow, it was kind of a fresh start in that way. It was bound and determined that everything we did was fun and camaraderie. So if you were a volunteer, this was going to be a fun time to be part of in all of the planning sessions. Tried to keep the planning meetings to a bare minimum, have more one-on-ones so people weren't sitting in long, boring committee meetings or Zoom meetings, much less. So that was really important. And this notion of the win-win-win. And I think the other thing was, kudos to our board. I think they were good to me in giving me sort of low expectations from a budget perspective. Sort of low expectations, high hopes, especially for a first year coming out of COVID. And that gave me, and I think the co-chairs, the freedom to be more creative and say, let's just try stuff. We're not sure what's going to work anymore. So that was good. In terms of what not to do, I would say I really leaned heavily on those co-chairs the second year, last year when we did it, this past June. I really tried to take a step back, get more of the staff involved. So be careful not to ask too much of them, even though because it wasn't their full-time job, but they were really enthusiastic. And then I think the other thing that I learned is not to spend too much time convincing people to get involved. and to do more of sort of showing them what fun it was, have word of mouth get out, and really work towards sort of a multi-year perspective on things. So don't try to get everything done the first year that you do it, but really go, okay, planting the seed, not your interest this year, totally fine, hope you can still come. And then the conversations the next year really were more conversations and more productive. Something other than revenue that we got out of it was clearly the community embrace of the library and our central role in the sense of coming back together. And that was a really great, launch for us to reopen the building as well. I think the other thing that I learned, I think we all know, is you can never say thank you enough, and all the different ways different people, some people really respond to, and businesses respond to social, some in person. So finding those ways. And then I think the other associated with that is taking the time to really personalize those thank yous. So the people who did buy the tickets, who were brave enough to come out, the businesses who donated, the people who volunteered their time, really trying to make those personalized. So I would say, even though this was something with a 20-year history, if you're starting brand new to think about something like this, I would encourage you to think creatively about it. Also, we have a huge library with a beautiful, lobby with, tall, huge ceilings and a dome. So we're very fortunate in terms of a place to host it. But although that's a part of it, I think any community building that could be very unique, or a barn who knows about insurance, or something that's a unique place for people to come together other than a restaurant, or a typical place for a community and for an organization like a library would be a good one. So those are some of my thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Catherine. That was very, very interesting. It's really cool how you put that together, and so fortunate how you hit the timing right, because the pandemic wasn't over, but there was, if you look at the data from Joshua Muse about, opening and there was that moment in 2021 where we thought we were free. Before I move on to Rebecca, I do want to say that Catherine wrote up these wonderful notes that she sent me, so you could always reach out to her if you wanted to if she would be willing to share her points, because they were very good points. Thank you very much, Catherine. We're going to move to Rebecca now. Rebecca is the director of Poultney Public Library, and I'm just going to hand it right over to Rebecca.
Hello, thank you so much for including me, Gary. I really appreciate it. I took over as director of Poultney Public Library in 2008. And at that point in time, we were almost 100% municipal funded, and we didn't really do any fundraising at all. What propelled us to raise funds was in 2014, we were ready to move forward with trying to renovate and expand our library, which was long overdue. There was work that had been deferred since the 70s. And so we started a fundraising campaign to make that work happen. And what we found was that there were so many people in the community that really wanted to help and were just waiting to be asked. The comment I heard over and over was, we assumed you didn't need the money because you weren't asking for it. So I'd just like to put out there, don't assume, ask. We do not have a friends group, so we work together, our library board, our library staff, and a bunch of patron volunteers that just really wanted to see the library grow, and tried a wide variety of fundraising, some more successful than others. But what was really a great fundraiser for us was a basket raffle. If you live in or near the Slate Valley, you know all about basket raffles. I've found that outside of our region, they're just not as big of a thing. But that doesn't mean they can't be. For those unfamiliar with it, a basket raffle is an all-day event. The hardest part is collecting everything ahead of time, because you really need at least 150 or 200 baskets. They usually have a $20 to $25 value. They're themed, cleaning supplies, gift certificates, baby items. And in our area, people just watch every weekend for the local basket raffle. For the baskets themselves, people buy sheets with 30 tickets, and they go around and put tickets in whatever items they want, and they'll buy stacks of them. You also get 5 big ticket items that you sell separate raffle tickets for. You have a concession stand, and you have a 50-50 raffle. And you put all that together in one day. It's a one-day event, and we find that a bad basket raffle, when you accidentally are going up against the big football game or something for your date because you didn't do your research, makes $3,000 to $4,000. An average basket raffle makes about $6,000. A really good one, if you are advertising ahead of time what your more exciting baskets are, makes easily $8,000 to $9,000 in a day, and you get everything donated. Because the other great thing about the baskets being, a $20 value is it's not a fundraiser that only a certain percentage of your population can afford to participate in. People get really excited finding things that they can put together to make a basket. We also encourage people to donate a single item or two, and then we stockpile those and mix and match things to make our own baskets. If this is something anybody's interested in learning more about for their community, I will tell you we've done so well with our basket raffles that I am now called in as a consultant for many local organizations, classes, because they want to see what our formula is to have these great fundraisers. So I have a whole packet of notes. I have menu items, prices to charge, where to get supplies, recommendations for places to get donations, and I'm happy to share that packet with anybody and everybody. I know word has gotten out about the basket raffles because I did one for the Vermont Fairy Tale Festival, and Jane Ramos tells everybody that'll sit still for 2 seconds to ask me about basket raffles. What we've learned through this is that people just really do want to help. They love the library. They want to support us. They just don't always know how. We talked to so many people when we did our first ever appeal letter that we would have people say, oh, I wanted to donate to the library, but I can only give $5. Or paper towels were on sale, buy one, get one free. Can I just give you a package of paper towels? Would that help you out? There's a lot of people that can't afford the big ask that just really want to help. And when you find a way for them to help, it makes them feel so much more invested in the library. So that's my big takeaway is include everyone, ask everyone. They really are out there and do want to help you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. I really appreciate how you try to, you give every person value, no matter what their economic status or what they can give. And this seems like something that's really accessible to a lot of people. And I've never heard of this, but I don't get out much.
It is the Slate area. It's New York and Vermont, right along this border where we are. Every weekend, somebody's having a basket raffle, but you get too far away from the Slate Belt and you just don't hear them.
Yeah. I guess if you go to too many, you could become a bit of a basket case. So there is a question from, I don't know if you can see chat. There's a question from Laura and then a question from Catherine. Want me to read it to you?
I see Laura's given the low, average, high dollar raise ranges. Are there a range of unique participants you could share? A lot of the range depends on choosing your date wisely. There's a lot going on in these small towns, and you have to make sure there's no other fundraisers, no sporting events that you're running into. A lot of it has to do with publicity. The single biggest factor I find is when you have those really great baskets We had a signed baseball we got from the Red Sox for our first one. So we had people come just to try to win that. So create a Facebook event, be posting pictures. Hey, look what came in today. Really build the excitement ahead of time. And that's going to make a big difference on where you fall in that range. Number of participants. We usually stop counting because we just get too busy selling the tickets, but usually a couple hundred people will come. Catherine asked how long in advance to start planning. Now that we've got several under our belt, 6 to 8 weeks we'll do it. The first one we had about 3 months for our planning. And Laura, purchasers of raffle tickets. I'm not sure, Laura, if you're.
I think that, Rebecca, that was the question about the numbers that you gave. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Rebecca. That was very interesting and very unique too. But I think baskets can spread, don't you think, that idea?
I think definitely.
I mean, just the amount that you get for one day is pretty impressive. I have a question for you, but I am going to come back to it because I want Rachel on next. And Rachel is the director. Thank you very much, Rebecca. Rachel is the director of the Waterbury Public Library. And thank you so much, Rachel. So I'm just going to give you the floor right now.
Talk about, instead of a big fundraiser, some kind of small tips that have really grown out of working with our friends group here in Waterbury, and have actually primarily grown out of some changes we made during pandemic closure and partial closure that ended up being sort of surprising little boosts in our fundraising. So we're a municipal library, but I work really closely with the Friends group, and historically the Friends group basically did an annual appeal for fundraising, and they didn't do too much else. But shortly before the pandemic hit, the Friends group did start a perpetual book sale here in the library. It's just a small set of shelves on the second floor of the library that they've bin putting some books for sale in. And when they first started the book sale, they did the traditional thing of kind of posting the costs. So I think paperback books $1, hardcover books $2, that kind of thing. During the pandemic, when the library was partially closed, those costs shifted to just being by donation, because staff didn't want to handle making change at that point, and everybody was just kind of overworked, and we didn't want to deal too much with the book sale situation. Surprisingly, this led to a real boost in funds that the book sale was bringing in. Suddenly, instead of giving us $2 for a hardcover book, people were giving us $5 for a hardcover book, or they'd grab a handful of paperbacks and give us $20 for those. This was kind of eye-opening and kind of a pleasant surprise, and I really wonder about the psychological reasoning behind it. People could have always given us more before, but suddenly when there were no price tags on the books, we were getting a lot more. So we're not going back. We're now going to be a by donation book sale. Yes, I'm sure there are people who take a book and they don't leave a donation, or they don't leave as much as we would have charged for it, but I think we are more than making up for it in the people who are being generous. The other thing that happened with the book sale that was pretty cool was we had, the Friends have long maintained a PayPal account, which is available through our website, but otherwise was not promoted very much. It would get a few hits during annual appeal time by some folks who didn't want to send in a check and instead would just jump on the PayPal account. But otherwise, it really was not getting a lot of use. When I started working here and I went to refresh that book sale space and make some new signs, I also created a QR code for the PayPal account. And I just stuck it up on those book sale signs. I didn't really think anything of it. It was kind of just a convenience factor. Suddenly, this PayPal account that was only getting a few hits around the annual appeal every year was getting a few hits every single month. So, we were basically taking down barriers for people to donate. The people who wanted to pick up books from the book sale, but like me, don't carry cash and don't know where their checkbook is, could just hit that PayPal account with their phone, and then again donate more than they probably would have if they were if they were going to pay the $2 for a hardcover book that was up there before. So these are little tiny things, but they really did make a difference. The other thing the Friends started doing this year was taking the book sale on the road. So twice in the summer, we took the book sale to the farmer's market. The secret to this is you don't need to bring that many books. Just bring a few boxes of books. People are so excited to see books at the farmer's market and to see the library at the farmer's market. They will buy those books, and they will also just make donations because they're there. So again, we brought not only our little jar for donations, but we brought those QR codes, and people could very easily pick up books, make those donations. And the really cool thing about the farmer's market is now we're going well beyond library patrons and our annual appeal letter. And the farmer's market was a great opportunity for us to chat with people in the community who don't come to the library a lot. And actually we used it for our strategic planning surveys as well, because it was a great way to kind of talk to some non-library users. But what really surprised me is how many people apparently travel from farmer's market to farmer's market in Vermont, because we sold so many books to people from Burlington and Montpelier and Stowe and other towns. And we sold so many books to people from Virginia and Boston and places all over the country who were visiting Vermont. And a lot of those people would end up leaving a pretty nice donation as well. So none of these are groundbreaking. The fundraisers sound so cool and like such amazing events. These are really just little tips, but they really have made a huge difference. And one thing that's also been really nice is with doing the show on the road farmers markets and doing this perpetual book sale here, the Friends are a lot more engaged in the library activities than they used to be. Historically, they would do the annual appeal, and they would sponsor an annual tea. But now I see them, one's here right now, working on the book sale right now. They're in the library a lot more. They're talking to me a ton. Because that envelope of money is filling up so much faster than it used to, they have to come in and pick up the cash and go deposit it. So we're really finding these little changes, which really only made life more convenient for everybody, have been making a huge difference. And I see a question from Margaret for the PayPal account. Do you include the suggested amounts? We don't, if the PayPal account doesn't really have anything about it, it's just a way to donate money. But the signs at the book sale no longer have suggested amounts, because we really do find, am I being a little manipulative doing that? I feel like there's something sort of, people seem to jump to bigger amounts than we were suggesting before. If people ask us, we do tell them $2 for a hardcover, $1 for a paperback, but we don't put that in writing anywhere. Maybe Gary can tell me if he thinks that's ethically ambiguous.
I think it's brilliant, because people will give you what they think it's valued. Plus, oh man, I like this library, so I'm going to throw $5. What's $5? It's $5, but yeah. It's still, you give them something of value.
Yeah, and now we're getting all these donations from people well beyond that appeal letter list, from all these tourists and from people who are just passing through, people who are here for a meeting in the municipal building will come into the library, find the book sale, and give us some cash. So it's been really, really nice.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I am a bit concerned that you don't know where your checkbook is, but that was a great idea. The PayPal, the QR code, and just the psychology of it is very interesting. About leave off the prices. What do you want to give? Take a book if you want for free. Yeah. But it's very good. There. Let's see. There was another question after that. From Jennifer Lucas. Are any of these fundraising revenues considered unrelated business income? Oh man, that's a good question for a controller. Unrelated business income or unearned business. I don't know. We're going to have to get back to you on that, Jennifer. I'm going to have to ask somebody, because it's funny. I haven't thought about this for a long time, but as somebody who has managed grants, that's always something that comes up in an audit. So thank you very much, and I forget the rules about it. So thank you so much to Catherine and to Rebecca and Rachel. We learned a lot about galas, and I like the cash bar. I saw that in Catherine's note. I was thinking, ooh, basket raffle and cash bar together. Perpetual book sale. All these things are really, really interesting. We have about 3 or 4 minutes for some other questions. And Tricia wrote, pretty sure that only kicks in over a certain percentage of your total income. And we don't call it income really, we call it revenue, don't we? Because it's not profit, it's this like net revenue for a nonprofit. The question I had, if there are no questions, I do have a question for Rebecca. So I'll just ask until I see something in the chat or somebody raising their hand. Rebecca, you said you didn't have a friends group and it was a municipal library. How do you manage the deposit, and how do you get the, make sure that it's yours to use through the municipality?
We have, and it was established long before I was here, but our library board has a library special account, which is where donations to the library and the majority of our fundraising goes, and then they report their account balances to the town so that it falls under the town audit, but the town does not have control of the money.
Okay. Georgia Public Library had a checkbook, which the town was certainly knowledgeable about, tracked. So similar kind of situation. So that
Yes.
is a possibility. Thank you very much, Rebecca. There's a question for Rachel. Are the books for the book sale donated books or books no longer used by the library? Oh, Rachel already answered, mostly donated. And the friends who manage it are very particular about what they put in the sale. Then Vicky writes, we have a trustee fund revenue account on the town's books. Yep, any net unspent at the end of the year is retained for us and rolls forward. That's way to do it. That's fantastic. Thank you, Vicky. Have another minute or two. If you have any other questions, comments, observations, these are so wonderful to have a panel to share some of these things, because as I reflect upon my list, it was pretty lame. And you guys are doing this, and imagine if we had information from every library, what an amazing bit of knowledge that would be. Margaret, how do you set up a trustees fund revenue account? And perhaps this is Vicky, if you wanted to answer that. You can put on your camera or put on just your audio.
I could unmute. There we go. Vicky
There
here.
you go, Vicky.
Yes, I think you probably want to talk to your town treasurer. We have a trustees fund revenue account and a trustees fund expense account. So money we get in goes to revenue, money we spend goes to the expense account, and then any net balance left over at the end of the year we get to carry forward. So I would say talk to your town treasurer, and if they want to talk to our town treasurer about how we did that, I can put you in touch.
Thank you so much, Vicky. And I imagine from an accounting perspective, it's the same sort of chart field as the library. However, the library is coded on the revenue side, it would be a line, a revenue and expense line, similar, so that when you did a report on the library, it would show up with it. But
right.
Vicky would know, and so contact Vicky. Thank you very much. Okay, Joy, it's 2 o'clock. I'll hand it back to you. Thank you so much to everybody for attending, and thanks again for Catherine and Rebecca at Rachel's time.
Thank you, Gary, as always, for doing these workshops for us. This was a great trio of workshops, and thank you to Catherine and Rebecca and Rachel especially. And thanks, of course, to everybody who came. And this was recorded, so it will be up on our website and Niche Academy soon.